So welcome everyone to the Shell with Pearl painting. My name is Anita Thompson, for those that don't know me. And tonight's painting is sponsored by Feasterville Library. Sorry, I have a lot of in-persons this week and they're all running through my head. Chrissy can't be here this evening, but she's the adult librarian. But I'll be recording this and it will be available after this evening. Chrissy will send it out and then it will be available on my YouTube channel in about a month. I have free tutorials on there if you're interested, and I will share my channel at the end. So for tonight, we are going to need our pencil first. This is a small but powerful painting. And if you like this sort of thing, there'll be more of this in the fall, doing some still lifes with vegetables and fruit. And let me see what else. I'm just finishing fall programs, so I may throw a few other things in, but anyway, let's get started, and we're going to draw this first. And if anybody has any questions, just pop those in the chat and I'll be happy to answer them. I guess I'll show you my brushes real fast before we start. So I put down that it's helpful to have about a size 6 flat brush. This is a size 6. You see that it's smaller. It's not a gigantic flat brush because we don't have a lot of ground to cover on a 6 by 6 inch canvas. And anything between a 6, like a 4 to a 6 is good. And then I have a very small detail brush. This is a size 2. Same thing, anything between like a 1 and a 3. Some people also like to get an even smaller brush along with these two. So if you have that, like a fine liner brush, they call them. You are welcome to grab that as well once we get started with the paint. Okay, so we're going to draw this. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to go towards the middle left of our canvas here. And so we come down from the top. And starting over here on the left side, basically what we're going to do is we're going to be kind of drawing in the shadow. So what the shell is resting on. So it's going to look like a curved line. So let's start that. So that's actually more than halfway down our canvas. And so we're going to start with a curve going down on the left. And then we're going to start penciling in sort of a circle for our shell. Our shell is going to take up most of our canvas space. And you can also create the edge over here as it is sticking out here. And I will give you time to complete this before we move on to the other side. With a little bit of the shell showing here at the bottom. You make this a little larger. We haven't completed the scalloped part yet. We will add that. So you want to make sure that you are drawing light. All right, and then coming over here on the right, we're just going to make another curve. And again, this is for the bottom of the sea. This is the shadow area. And before we get into the specifics of the shell, we're going to draw some of the sort of rocks and broken shells and debris that are happening here. at the bottom. Now, if you don't have the exact amount of debris that I have, not to worry. We just want to make sure that we get some of these shapes in. And once I tell you how to create them, they're pretty easy to recreate because there's always a shadow underneath, a shadow shape, and then it's lighter on the top. Have one right here, the bottom of our canvas. Oops. So I've moved over to the right over here. And again, I'm just kind of making some of those, some quick kind of debris shapes. Everything else, we're going to be painting it in, including the bubbles at the top. We're going to paint those in, hand paint those. We won't draw them. And then we're going to create our pearl, which is going to be toward the bottom left side of our shell. So we have this space right here, right? This part of the shell that's jutting out, and we have our pearl that is basically going to be a circle. And then we're also going to draw the shadow shape as well. Oops, I had it more round the first time. There we go. And then when you're ready, you're going to draw the shadow shape, which is going to look a little something like this. And then we're going to start drawing the scalloped edges. And so we're going to start here on the left. And so we're going to make bumps all around. We have the first three, and the third one is a bit smaller. And then it gets a little larger as we're going around. So we're going to be making these look three-dimensional in a second. For now, we're just kind of creating the bumps. You're going to follow the outline of your circle that you created for the shell. You may have to adjust it when we start drawing in some of the lines, the guidelines that we'll be using. And obviously you want to go and erase the line that you drew around the circle that is now scalloped. So your pearl, or I'm sorry, your shell should now look more scalloped. And then we're going to go to the inside of each portion of the top of the shell because each portion is curved over. So you see a little bit of the underside. And that's what this white rim is as we go around. I'm going to show that up close. So see what I'm doing here? Kind of taking each part. It's curved on the inside because that part of the shell is kind of coming up and curving a little bit over. And we're just going to create some dividing lines here, very light. And we're going to create one more shadow shape before we start painting. So on the other side of the pearl, on the opposite side, we're going to make sort of a half circle. That's going to be where our turquoise shadow is going to be. Now we are ready to paint. So our first color that we're going to paint with is going to be our turquoise, and we're going to start in the background. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to use our flat brush to cover the background with turquoise. Then what we're going to do is we're going to start making, place in the shadows. There is a purplish black shadow here on the right and more, or I should say another one on the left, with an indication that there are some rocks in the background. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start off with our flat brush and we're going to paint starting over from the left all the way to the right, but we're going to leave the top right, or I'm sorry, the top left corner blank because as you can see, there's a lot of white in there. So what we'll be doing is we will add a little bit of paint there, but not to the corner. So I'm gonna grab the brush. And you are welcome to go and use both your flat brush and your round brush, especially as you are painting around your shell. I just use my flat brush and I kind of angle it so that I can get in between each portion of the scalloped edges. But if you feel better using your round brush, please do. So I just sort of traced around my shell, and the base part of where sort of our background meets the, or I guess the floor of our ocean kind of meets our background. And then I'm just going to kind of show you what it's going to look like in that upper left corner there. A lot of really fun colors happening in this painting. I had a lot of fun kind of adding in a lot of the blues and the purples for the shadows. In the fall, one of the smaller paintings we're going to be doing is a pumpkin with a spider kind of hanging from the tip of the, oh gosh, what do you call that thing? Uh, the tip part of the pumpkin. It's not coming to me right now. But you want to make sure and cover that whole background using your turquoise. You can do a very light covering in the upper left corner. So I just sort of smoothed my brush over that portion very lightly. And when you're ready, we're going to keep that color on our brush, and we're going to dip the tip of it into our blue. So here's my blue. I'm just going to dip the tip of it in like so. And we're going to start over on the left side here. And we're going to add some of that dark blue into the turquoise paint. So your paint should be wet. So it's going to create sort of a lovely kind of shadow a little bit here. That's not going to be the only color we're going to do, but for right now, we're going to add more of that blue. And we're going to start to now go around the shell, and we're going to flick our brush upwards as we are going around the shell. So if you like, you can take your blue and kind of go really close to each of the scalloped parts, like we did with the turquoise. All the way to the other side. So now it's sort of outlined with a little bit of blue. And then when you're ready, you're going to start from each of those edges and you're going to push your brush and the blue upward, going towards the top left corner. Now you'll probably need to keep adding some streaks of blue. And what I'm doing is I'm actually turning my brush to the side so that I sort of get the, it's sort of a little pointier. And then we're going to start making our shadow here on the right as well. And we're going to be adding purple to this and black eventually. But we want a base of this blue. I'm going to change the angle of my lamp. I think it's putting too much light on that section. There we go. That's better. Now you can see it without a reflection or too much light on it. So you're going to start to kind of streak that blue toward the top right corner as well. So you want sort of the turquoise to be showing through, but then also you want some blue to be streaking through it as well. And this is where we start to really lay on some varied colors. Now, once you have that done, you're going to mix a little bit of yellow with this blue to make a green. I'm just going to tip into my yellow. And we're going to kind of make sort of a greenish blue using yellow and the blue that is still on our brush. So you see how it's still sort of a kind of a bluish green. And we're going to use that color to also streak a bit in this top right corner, but not exactly. So we're at the corner like here, and we kind of go around here too. Let me add a little more so you can see it. Oops. So you see, we're just giving it some dimension. You're also going to add it in all around the shell. Like so. And then we're going to rinse our brush off because we're going to be adding some purple. So our purple is going to be around, sort of all around our shell. We're going to outline a bit in purple, and then we're going to streak upwards in purple here. That's the shadow that you see here. And so same thing, we kind of get the tip of our brush with some purple. And we're going to start using the side of the tip of our brush. So still using the flat brush, but again, if it's easier for you to switch to your detail brush, because we're going to be going and kind of outlining again right around the edges of our scalloping. And then our final part will be adding a little bit of black to those parts too. But for now, we're adding the purple. And just take your time. You're going to go all the way around. And you should now have a purple kind of outward line tracing around your shell. And you're going to keep that purple on the tip of your brush, because we're going to start then doing just as we did with the other colors. We're going to start flicking upward with this color from the shell. It's okay to go back. So what I'm doing is, as the paint is coming off of my brush, I'm also still using my brush to sort of pat the color into the canvas so that it's a little muted, right? Like I'm almost blending it with the brush. And then as I'm going to come over here to the right side, I'm going to get darker with that purple. More intentional with the purple. But again, as the purple is kind of descending toward the right, you're going to fade it out a bit by still continuing to use your brush with the paint that is drying on it, and kind of go towards the corner here. And then you're also going to sweep upward with that remaining paint on your brush, so that you now have a very varied background, very colorful. And we're going to grab our detail brush when you're finished with that. You're going to keep your other brush. You can rinse that off and have it laying next to you, because we're going to pick that up again, because we're going to be applying black now. But we're going to be doing the black first with our detail brush. All right, so same thing, we're going to kind of use the tip now. So now we're doing some detail. And again, we're going to kind of scallop around, starting on the left here. And we're going to trace around the first three scalloped edges of the shell. And then we're going to skip a bit of space as far as the scalloped goes. And now we're going to come up to about maybe the middle part here. And start to outline on the outside of the scalloping. Now we're probably going to go back later on once we paint this all in and, you know, add some fine tuning to it. But what we're doing right now is we are outlining those edges, and then we will smooth those out just like we did with the other brush. When the paint, you know, there was just a little bit of paint on it, but we're basically tracing around each of the scalloped edges on the right side of the shell. Also, sometimes you have to wet your brush a bit with some water in order to get a little more of a liquid consistency of your paint. Sometimes that helps when you're doing such small spaces like this, or I should say small, you know, detailed areas. So I just wet mine a little bit. Okay. We're going to rinse here. I'm going to rinse that brush. And you're going to pick up your flat brush and you're going to add just a little bit of black to the tip of it. And we're going to start over here on the right side because that is where our darkest shadow is. And we're going to kind of trace around right above where we created the curve. So you can see that there's still the purple and blue here. Here's my black. So we're going to kind of make another line. And then we're going to turn our brush over to the side and we're going to start painting upward so that we make it a little darker. We're mixing that in to our purple. It's sitting on top of our purple here. And you're going to do the same thing as far as we've already traced around the shell using our black. Well, now we're going to go around it using the little bit of paint that's on this brush. And we're just going to pull and create some more of that black into the rest of the paint. So you can see I'm kind of doing a back and forth motion. And then we'll come back in and we will re-add some more purple and blue on top of that once we get to the left corner. but we're actually going to let this sit for a bit, and we're going to start in on the bottom portion of our painting. So you want to make sure to wash both your brushes again, because we will be using those for the bottom. And if you want, you can get some fresh water at this point, because we're going to be working in some of the lighter, kind of the lighter colors. You don't have to. I just always do when my water is murky. So I'm just going to go grab some fresh water in the hall. We're going to make sure our brushes are nice and clean. And we're going to start off with our detail brush, and the colors in the bottom are going to be mostly turquoise. We're going to lighten it up using white here in the middle. We also have an orangey green background here that's going to fade into a purple shadow here on the bottom right corner, just letting you know all the colors that are happening. And then here on the left side, going against the shell and coming into the bottom part of the C right here, we're going to be using regular blue and black. But first, we're going to start off with turquoise. Our base is turquoise, and that is going to cover the entire floor of our sea. So we're going to be painting around our rocks and our broken bits of shell. And so we want to use our detail brush to kind of do that first. So for this one, I do like to pre-outline all of the shell and rock bits here. And then we're going to paint turquoise. You can just briefly kind of outline all of these little bits. We're also going to be outlining where the shell is up against the floor of the ocean. And you're also going to go up against the curved areas on either side using your turquoise. So turquoise is kind of the star of the show right now. And once you have all of them outlined, you can then go back and paint around, these rocks and bits using your turquoise for the first layer of color. And it's up to you whether you want to go and use your flat brush or continue using your detail brush. I like to go in with my flat brush because it's a little faster. You're just going to take your time around each of the rocks. Especially in the bottom right corner here, where there are quite a bit of rocks happening. Our next color combination is going to be little of the turquoise and little of the purple. And what we're going to do is we're going to be creating some of the rocks here on the side on the left. And then we're going to be coming over here. So I'm just going to show you a close-up of the original. So you can see that there's little slices, right, of the bottom coming through the shadow. And so we want to recreate that. And then over here, we're first going to be taking the black and going to be kind of painting around and making rocks around it. So let's grab our black first for this side. And again, we're just going to grab it on the tip of our brush. So just a little bit. And basically, we're sort of going to be drawing in rocks using this black. So like this. And then we're going to keep that black on our brush and we're going to add some blue. So regular blue. And you can mix it in with the black a bit. So here it's on the tip of my brush is still the black. I'm mixing it with the blue to now get sort of a midnight blue. And then we're going to come back and take that color and we're going to paint in between, sort of where the rocks are, in between the black. And we're going to smudge the line of the rocks by taking our brush and kind of sweeping it back and forth so that we created those rocks, but now we're just going to make them a little bit muted. And then we're going to take, while we have that bluish black on the tip of our brush, we're going to keep it on the tip of our brush, but we're going to add a little turquoise. So again, we keep that black and blue on our brush, and then we're going to add a little bit of that turquoise because we're now going to move this color down towards our rocks. Now you may have to add in some more blue, like I just did that, so that it's now faded a little better into the bottom, into our turquoise. So what I did was I just put a little more blue on my brush and I started painting downward into the bottom of the sea, because we're then going to take this color and we're going to add it also around here, but we're going to use our detail brush for that. So hold on to this brush because with that color on it, because we're going to come around here and still add in those little dappled areas that we see shining through the black. So hold on to this brush with the color, take your detail brush, and you're going to do the same thing where you're going to add a little bit of the black and the blue, and then a swab of the turquoise, because we're now going to go around here and outline. So that's more of a shadow. You may have to pick up a little more of blue in order to get it to be a little darker. So regular blue as you're kind of going across. And as you're going across the shell, the bottom of the shell, and you're getting into the bottom of the floor of the ocean, you want to start bringing that blue around right here. So I'll say that again. So as we're getting around the shell here and kind of making a shadow, you're going to take that blue and you're going to kind of take it into the right side, going right up against the black and the purple shadow that you created. When you're finished with that, we're going to come back to the shell area here because we're going to make a few more scallops here so that there is a piece right here that is now unpainted. You're going to hold on to this brush and you're going to add a little bit of turquoise to it. So we're working a lot with those three colors, black, blue, and turquoise, kind of letting them mix on our brush. And then we're going to come over here on the right and we're going to dapple some spots on the right side in the shadow. Now you may have to extend the shadow a bit down. And so you can add a little more purple. And you're going to just start to kind of extend it down. And you're going to go in between. So you're kind of going around and almost like we're making the rocks again. So that's what we're doing. We're kind of making the rocks on this side. And so we're painting around the rocks using a darker color to make it more shadow-like. But we don't want it so, we don't want it to look, marker dark. So I like to go back in using the turquoise, a little bit on my brush, and then I paint right over the purple and blue we just created, and it will create kind of a grayish kind of blue, which is a little bit lighter of what you want in this part here. So again, you might have to go back, add some more turquoise while it's wet. You can add, I add turquoise and just a hint of blue to kind of fade that color. See how I'm going back and forth with my small brush and blending in so that it's sort of a gradient. And again, on my brush, there was some turquoise, some purple, and blue, but I went back in with a little more blue. kind of round that out before we add in the turquoise. We are actually going to wash our flat brush because I think we're going to go lighter before we get a little darker. Um, so wash both of your brushes. And we're now going to mix our white with some turquoise. So we're kind of doing in the middle here. And we're going to be adding in some yellow as well. But right now we want to kind of lighten up this area. And so we're going to start off with some lightened up turquoise. And then we're going to work from there. We're going to add some more colors into that as it's wet. That's the key to getting a lot of these colors, is working into the paint as it's wet. Not as easy to do with acrylics because acrylics dry faster. You can buy, I've never used it, but I probably should after all these years of doing acrylics. There's like I feel like it's called a retarder, and it slows down the drying of the paint and it makes it act like oil paint. If you've ever used oils before, oils are very slow drying. And the great thing about oils is that you can, layer slowly. With acrylics, you really have to work faster. So anyway, that's kind of my spiel about that. But I like acrylics. They're easy to use. They're vibrant. So I'm also smoothing out where the light turquoise meets up here with the blue. Glazing liquid. No, it's not glazing liquid. A glaze sort of sits on top. This is more, I don't think it's called glazing liquid. I think it's, I'll have to take a look. I've never used it, but I've read about it. But I don't think it's glazing liquid. So once we have this part that's a little bit lighter, we're now going to add even more lighter white with just a tip of it on our brush. And then we're going to mix in. So this is where we created, remember before we kind of created that green. We're going to use it now with our turquoise and yellow. So you're going to get a lighter green. It's more along the lines of this color. And we're going to start now adding in some of this lighter green. And we're even going to go over here on the right side. And we're going to paint around our rocks. And you don't have to worry about, getting it exactly up to the rock because we're going to be creating shadow shapes using our detail brush. And we're also going to be adding orange to this color. So I'm sort of kind of adding a light, um, kind of a light base on top of that, the turquoise. Oops. If you notice, I started adding this yellowish green toward the bottom left here of the painting. This is where we're going to start varying our colors. And I like to then go in with some white while it's still on my brush and create some light spots. And you may have to also keep adding in a little bit of turquoise. I'm just adding little tiny bits, like a real tiny bit, and then working in those colors that are still on my brush. So kind of doing it as the paint is wet. I'm going to add a little more turquoise. It's, well, actually a little lightened up turquoise here to get a bit of a lighter blue color. And we're going to throw in some yellow on this left side as well. But this whole time I haven't rinsed my brush. I want these colors to kind of mesh together. So I keep switching back and forth between yellow and turquoise to kind of get bits of yellowy turquoise, like what I'm doing here in the corner, left corner. Adding a little white, spots of white. We want to make it look like that, that light is shining down from the top left corner and is kind of hitting here on the surface, under the water. And again, I like to go back in with a little bit of some blue and turquoise because there's a spot here that is a little darker right here. Let me make that a little darker so you can see it. That's the spot I'm talking about, right there. And we're going to make a little bit of purple and add a little bit of purple here on the bottom right corner. Again, as all the colors, as it's wet. And our new color is going to be, well, first we're going to add a little bit of yellow over on the left, kind of some yellow on the tip of, again, the tip of my brush. And then I kind of add in a little bit of turquoise if it's a little too yellow. Just kind of adding it in here on the left side. And then we're going to add orange on the right side. So again, I'm adding dabs of yellow on the left side. And then we're going to be mixing some yellow and orange, tiny bit, because we don't need a whole lot. And we're going to kind of get this color and add some purple. So yellow, orange, and a little bit of purple. Make that a little more yellow. To kind of be like a muddy, kind of like mustardy kind of color. And that's what we're going to add around our rocks. And we're going to kind of quickly add it because then we're going to add back in some yellow. We're going to go right up against where our purple is, and we're going to add a bit of it to the inside the purple. Now, here in the corner, we have that purple, and you may have to add a little more purple to your brush while you have the orange on it. And that's also going to be the shadows for our rocks. So I'll say that again. Basically, I added a little more orange to the purple here in the bottom right corner. And now this is also going to be the shadowing underneath our rocks. Now, if you want, you can switch to your smaller brush, but I did it real quickly with the side, kind of the side of my brush here. Add some here. Also on the left side, although we're going to add some more gray there. But I then add a little bit of that greenish color that we mixed earlier on top of this orange and purple. So we're not on the stones yet. We're now just kind of dampening and kind of like um, adding in some of this green. I like to add a little bit of yellow in too. And we're just kind of mixing all those colors together, kind of fading them into each other. So there's this kind of this dirty kind of, you're not quite sure what color it is, but it's got all these colors in it. And you can play with the color by adding a little more orange if it looks a little too kind of bland. But working now around your rocks. And sometimes you have to add a little more turquoise back in to the edge. Of that color. And then we're going to mix up some white and black to make a gray, a very light gray for the stones. Some of the stones are a little bit brighter, but we'll go in with like a speck of white. So when you're ready, you want to mix up some incredibly light gray to paint all of your stones on the left and the right. Now remember, you're going to paint, and preserve the shadow underneath each one. And then you're going to add kind of a speck of white to each one so that it looks like there's some light on the stones. And again, obviously this is using your smaller brush. And I've still kept kind of the gray on my brush so that it kind of mixes in with the white. I'm just kind of dotting it using the side of my detail brush. And I like to add a tiny bit of black underneath each stone on the left side. Actually, I didn't do it under every stone. I did it under 4 of these. So just a little bit to give it like a little more of a shadow. Again, using my small brush. I think we might run 10 more minutes over if everyone's okay with that. For these last parts. As we finish up. No, and you're welcome to add more dabs of white in the bottom floor of the ocean here. We're going to move on up. To finish off the background up above, and then finally start on our shell. And the shell actually goes pretty fast. You would be surprised. The shell is actually the fastest part. So when you're ready, you're going to take your white, again, using the tip of your flat brush. And you're going to venture into the top left corner. And you're going to make streaks of light up here. Using your white. We're going to mix in some little bit of turquoise. A little bit of the yellowy green. Tiny bit of turquoise here. And so what we do is we start to kind of play with the color around the white, and we start to add colors back into, it's not really the sky, but around the white. Kind of mix in. I'm gonna add a tiny bit of yellow here. You can add a little bit of blue. And then you want the light very bright. You know, you can kind of add on a little more chunky white in the corner of the painting, and then just have a little bit of it coming out in kind of a few strokes. And then you're probably wondering, well, how do we get the bubbles? So the bubbles are white circles with a little bit of black around them. And so we use our tiny brush, and I like to make two very tiny bubbles. First, and then ones that are kind of a double, but I'm using very light paint, light application of the paint so that it's not so solid. And you can make as many bubbles as you like. So it's just round circles. And I usually put like a little bit of sort of a white kind of line in it as well. But the key is to kind of go around on the outside using a really thin, like a little bit of black. And then I sometimes go on the inside as well. Kind of trace around just a little bit of the bubble. And this is where, I mentioned that using a little bit of water mixed with your paint. This is where this would actually work very well. Sometimes I kind of have to fix around the bubble using the background color. Um, so I go over a little bit. Did that with this bubble. Got a little carried away, so I'm just going to add a little more of the blue back in. The last part of the shell is going to be, again, using our turquoise at first toward the top portion of the inside of the shell. And you want to make sure to kind of go around the scalloped parts, but remember on the edge, you want to leave that white because it flips over to show the other side. So we're going to do a combination of using the turquoise and blue in the bottom left side here for now. So we first go around and we add the turquoise. Now, when you're ready, you're going to keep that turquoise again on your brush, and you're going to add some white. And this is where we're going to start to make the lighter portions and the sections of each section of the shell. So this is our second layer. Now, if you need to switch to your smaller brush, you can absolutely do that. And I would absolutely recommend it for the top portions here. We definitely want to add the white to the outside of where it's kind of curving around on the edge of each scallop. And I use kind of a thick application of the white paint for these sections. And this is going to help you then finish off each section of the scalloped sections. And as you're taking that white around the edge, you're also going to start taking it around the side here and also the flatter side here. But we add a little bit of gray to it. Actually, to the line part of where kind of looks like an envelope a little bit. The lines that are underneath it and kind of going around it are gray. I have that. I just added a little bit of black and a little bit of white to make a really dark gray. This one's a little darker gray than what we've been using. We're still working on the outside of the pearl here. And so now what we can do is start to define each of those sections by adding some blue and we're going to add purple. It's going to be this combination of adding the blue and purple in the areas that are separating. And remember, we have this dark shadow to the right of inside. And then on the left, that shadow is mixed with turquoise and blue. So this shadow is blue. This shadow is a combination of turquoise and blue. And then we have black on this one as well, on the right side. This is all done with our smaller brush at this point. I do use my flat brush for some of it, but I think a lot of people, it's probably easier to use your smaller brush. But we're going to start getting in very white where the base on the right side of the pearl is. And then adding a bit of white to that, but then also starting to mix in some lavender, which is purple and white. And that's where you're going to find the variations of color in each section. And you'll go back and forth between adding some of that lavender, and then while it's still on your brush, you're going to go back in and add blue. I add lavender sometimes to the top portion of each section. So I'm now going back in and I'm just kind of using my lavender to kind of outline each section. But then I'm going to go back in and add blue at the top of each section so that my lavender is combining and it's starting to get where there's multiple colors. But then I'm going to come back in with my blue also at the top part. The scalloped sections. And where the scalloping is happening, I kind of go under there with my brush with the blue to kind of outline it. And so I sometimes take that line and create, the separated line from each section. And then I add the color while it's still on my brush. I use turquoise, blue, and then the last part's going to be adding the white from the bottom and going into the top, which is going to make that look like, really look like it's kind of coming from the bottom. So just taking my white now, and again, applying it very thick. But we're going to want to let it dry a little bit. can come back and do one more last coat of the white as we work on the pearl. There's a bit of lavender and some of like where the envelope part is. I know I call it the envelope. It's like that section, and then the part here underneath. And when you're ready, we're going to add some black over here, but we're going to mix it in with some blue. What we also do is we add a little tinge of black underneath the left side of the scallops as well. We add a bit of black, but then I'm going to rinse and either add, so I'm going to add a little bit of the turquoise to mix that in so that it gets kind of a grayish. It blends a little. And we're going to take that gray and we're going to outline the pearl on the left side. Now the inside of our pearl is gray mixed in with some green and swirls of white. Get that a little bit lighter. So we start with it being sort of a light gray, but we leave some space in the middle here, like a circular space, right? Because we're going to add white. Big highlight of white. And around the right side. We're going to add kind of like a kidney shaped area of turquoise on the right side. And we're going to let that dry for a second because we're then going to go back in with our white in the other section to make it very bright. And then we'll go back and finish off the pearl. And we'll be done. And you can add a little bit more of some, I like to add a little more lavender in toward the end here after adding in the white. Kind of at the top of each section along the sides and at the top. Just gives it a little more variation. Sometimes I go back in and add a little more streaks of the turquoise. But then we finally go back to the pearl. And we add a little bit of white to the turquoise part in the kidney shaped section. And we add some of that green. Remember that green that we mixed up? That's at the top of the pearl. Then I keep that color on my brush. And I start to add in a little bit of blue. And a little bit of purple, or I should say lavender. So it's kind of this mix of kind of colors. And obviously ending with a little bit of a streak of white on the edge on the right side. You can see how these turned out in about maybe 3 minutes. So I went over a bit more. I wanted to make sure to explain the last part a little more in detail than I did when I taught this the last time. I feel like it's a little more helpful to explain it in a little more detail when it comes to the shell part. Rinse my brush. I'll be right back and we'll check in on everyone. Don't be surprised if you're tweaking this one, later on. This is a difficult one for sure. But I'm going to stop the recording.